Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I want to follow on from some of the points made by my colleague, the Honourable Trevor Mallard. Let me first start by asking my colleague across the House, David Bennett, if he might be getting up to talk to us about some of the implications of this bill for share milkers, because I understand that being an MP from the Waikato, he has some knowledge on the matter of share milkers, and I'm sure he will be wanting to stand up and try and deal with some of those very important questions about these tax changes and the implications they may have for share milkers. But look, I rise to talk on part two. And as Trevor Mallard said, this part is actually a huge part with a whole range of provisions that traverse some quite wide territory in terms of matters relating to emissions units, matters relating to superannuation and treatment of various superannuation matters, matters relating to for example, the calculation of tax liability or tax credit of multi-rate pies, exceptions for foreign pie equivalents, a whole range of quite substantive matters, a very large part of this bill. And of course what we're concerned about over this side of the House is that despite all the good work and despite consideration by a select committee, and my colleague Stuart Nash has referred to some of this, despite all of that and the ability to deal with those matters collaboratively as a House, what we found instead is that we end up opposing this bill because of a substantial SOP 187, which has raised a whole range of very significant matters in addition to what was a very significant bill, and without any ability for Select Committee to consider it. And we consider that to be a serious abuse of process. Now, of course, it probably isn't a surprise to see that happening, because what we have seen time after time with this government is an abuse of process, is a lack of commitment to our democratic process, to the use of select committees properly, fast-tracking significant legislation through shortened up select committee processes, or indeed through the use of urgency. And here we are again in urgency and abuse of process. Now, this SOP was introduced at the 11th hour, and MPs have had very little time to consider it in detail, and at 70 pages it's actually larger than the original bill, which was 57 pages at first reading. So it should have gone to a select committee, and this is the first opportunity this Parliament has had to consider the provisions of that SOP. And the complexity of tax legislation, and I'm certainly no expert at all on tax legislation, means that it benefits more than most legislation from full select committee processes, because we do need people to consider it and get expert advice on it. Now, the provisions of the SOP, a number of my colleagues have already looked at the LAQC changes that are in there, and certainly on first appearance there are probably a number of areas there that we would have very little problem with, that we are likely to want to support, because we don't want to see people abusing the system to minimise or limit their tax liabilities. And also, I want to specifically talk about the provisions related to, let me find it, sorry, the provisions related to, my apologies to the House, I've just lost my page. Oh yes, the broader definition of income for social assistance. Now, I think on the face of it that sounds like a very sensible provision to expand to include income from family trusts, fringe benefits in certain circumstances, income from a cash pie that is not locked in, and income from a spouse living overseas. People are structuring their affairs to inflate their entitlements, and we have concerns clearly if that is being used then to abuse things like working for families that actually is designed to assist those people who genuinely need it, not those people who can structure their income in certain ways to get assistance that they are not in need of. And I just would note that it is wage and salary earners who are the people who end up generally paying the tax that they have to pay. Their affairs are generally simple, Mr Chair.
Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, wage and salary earners on the whole, their financial affairs are generally pretty simple, and they end up paying the tax that they are liable to pay. And over this side of the House, we do not see it as appropriate that those who can structure sources of income to minimise their tax liabilities or to access entitlements to which they do not need should be something that's happening. So to that extent, there are probably some very sensible provisions in this SOP. But talking of wage and salary earners, I do also want to note the fact that this government has made it more difficult for those people who rely on wages and salary primarily to make ends meet. Those people are struggling at the moment. They do pay their full tax liabilities, and they are struggling. And a number of the changes that this government has made in employment relations legislation mean that they will struggle more because their income, it is potentially going to reduce their income. People who are dismissed without reason or right of redress, of course, lose income. People who cannot access assistance from their union organiser to organise themselves to collectively bargain and improve their income, of course, also will effectively suffer on lower wages than they need, and of course that has tax implications too. What we all should be aspiring for is the complete opposite, in fact, where we lift wages, where we have employment relations legislation that makes it easier for people to organise and improve their wages. But going back to the provisions of Part 2, I would again reiterate that this is a very complicated bill already. It had got a lot of work done on it and a degree of support across the House. And the fact is, I think it is incredibly silly for the government to have done what they've done in tabling this SOP, to abuse the process, to mean that we end up voting against this bill. They could have done what they were trying to do, which on the face of it, as I say, particularly in relation to LAQCs and the definition of income for social assistance, we may well have supported, and they could have still done that using a different mechanism. So with that, I will say that, again, repeat that Labor will not be supporting this bill.
Tim McIndoe.